Welcome to Innovator Café, the entrepreneur go-to, with your host, attorney Dave Stevens. Through each episode, Dave and his guests provide resources and assurances to build a company growth roadmap. You can find this show on all the major platforms, including YouTube, LinkedIn, Facebook, Apple Podcasts, Spotify, and the website StevensLawGroup.com. Now here's the host of Innovator Café, Dave Stevens.
Hey everybody, welcome again to Innovator Café. Today we have two experts, and I'll call them insurance experts, but there's so much more than that. Michael Keck and Kelly Costello. I've known Michael for a very long time. He coached my kids in baseball, which I'm forever endeared to him for. And he's so much more than that. These guys work with companies big and small, and they really have an interesting and innovative approach, which is what Innovator Cafe is all about, is different approaches, not just to selling your products, but, why are you selling this product? How much are you helping people? And we'll get into that. Michael, first, why don't you tell us a little bit about yourself, and Kelly, you can follow after that.
Sounds great. Hi, Dave. Hi, everyone. Pleasure to be with you today. My name is Michael Keck, as Dave mentioned, and what we do and what I do daily is engage with business leaders and help them figure out how to make great decisions. And the particular realm that we work in, our teams, is risk management and trying to figure out how to attract and retain great employees and keep them healthy and productive and all those things. Building teams is something that grew up as an athlete, and I love the concept of a group of people working together, being able to achieve a lot more than they could on their own. Dave, you and I know we talk a lot about teamwork, and continue to coach youth sports today. And it's just one of those things I have a huge passion for. But one of the other things, and I'll share a little bit more about this after I'd love for Kelly to introduce herself, and then we can go from there.
Kelly.
Yeah. Thanks, Michael. Thanks, Dave. I appreciate you guys having us on this podcast. I started my career on the insurance company side, underwriting business, and then I moved over to Hub about 4 years ago. And as Michael put it, we're just advising clients on their risk profile and kind of letting them know how insurance can help. So I won't dive too much deeper into it. I know you want to get started with some heavy questions for us, so we're excited.
Yeah, for sure. I love that you both talked about risk, right? Because it's something that doesn't really enter into the vernacular of startups, engineers, right? It's really something, even business people for that matter. And when it comes to startups, like, this is what I specialize in, and people just want to dive in and make that awesome product and make a fortune. And, damn the torpedoes, right? The younger, the worse, right? There is no risk because, they have nothing but time and no failures behind them, right? But keeping your mind on risk, being mindful of risk, really makes everything sustainable. Why don't you talk about that a little bit, Mike, if you could?
Sure. Yeah, absolutely. Everything we do every day has risk to it. And what our team does and the role that we play with our clients is to engage in conversations about what is the business trying to accomplish and where might there be pitfalls along the way. One of the things we see at all stages is that, the real innovators, they're pushing the boundaries of things, and they want to march forward, and they want to do great things. And that includes assembling great teams, but it also includes assembling great products and going after huge opportunities. And what that means is that, those two things are kind of linked, right? You could say Kelly and I have had the pleasure together of working with hundreds and hundreds of companies and business leaders, and we see everything. We see people that just want to run really, really fast. We see people that move forward cautiously, but all of them have this one thing that I love and I really enjoy about what we do, which is they all have passion. They all love what they're doing. And I would say, that's one of the things we're blessed. Our team has the same. Like, even though when you hear the word insurance or risk management, as you noted, Dave, people are like, ooh, gosh, I don't know much about how to do that. And that's why our role exists, right? We're consultants. We act as a guide, as a coach, as a quarterback. When people want to run really fast in one direction, we help them take note of what are the risks? Like how might this go wrong? How might things get off the rails, right? And so a lot of times they don't know how to evaluate how bad it could be. And so we help them with that. And then we help them, should they want to cover those risks in some meaningful way, it's almost always a good idea to evaluate what does that look like. Kelly,
yeah. And the younger they are, the more blind they are, aren't they? You know, when I was a kid, I think I was 18 years old. I was a carpenter, and I went out on my own. I was like putting roofs on people's houses, which I had no business doing at that age, right? And people were hiring me. And first thing I did is I hired my friends. You can imagine how that turned out, right? So like, wait, you're in charge? Who made you in charge, right? And it's so very, very obvious risk, right? And startups are really no different. They're blinded because they see this golden thing at the end of their path, and they just want to get there. They know how they can do it technically, right? But they have to assemble a team. So Kelly, why don't you talk a little bit about that? How can you help them assemble a team? They might seem like it's their business. How can you help them with that?
Yeah, definitely. And just to touch on what you and Michael were talking about, we insure a lot of tech companies, and we call the CFOs and CEOs of tech companies cheetahs, because they're the fastest moving land animal. And so we want to be on the same pace as them and just make sure we're just, assessing everything along the way.
Right.
But yeah, when you're dealing with a team, a lot of it is about, hiring people, as you mentioned. You don't want to hire too fast. You don't want to hire too slow. You want to attract the right type of talent and then retain those key players. And a lot of that is what Michael deals with day to day. Michael, do you want to talk about a little bit about teams?
Yeah, absolutely. And I would say over the years, what we've seen, Dave, in that realm is that, as Kelly noted, when people have their eyes on that market or that product or whatever it is, they run really fast towards it. And that sometimes means they realize that if they've raised some money or if they've not, they know that they need help. They know that in any given day, they have a list of 100 things that need to get done by the end of the week, and there's no way they can get there. And so they're like, we have to hire. So they go out and they hire. And as Kelly noted, sometimes when you bring on people really quickly and you assemble a team and the team isn't working, that's one of the things that we have seen, right? Where people just want to go quickly. And the reality is that the careful assembly of the team and the management of it and the leadership of it and the inspiration of it is what makes the difference. And so that seems to be what we hear over and over again, is that there's real risk if you bring in a team that isn't working well together. And to your point, Dave, they like to focus on the product, the problem, the solving, because that's what we're good at. As humans, it's good at that. It's not good at controlling other people because it doesn't work, right? If somebody has a tendency or a habit or a capability or a weakness, and that pollutes the team in some way, it's really hard to address that. And it's really hard to get the team together, get them back on the right page, and keep them all marching in the same direction, because it can be a huge distraction. And so, the earlier on in the roadmap of whatever it is you're building, what you're growing towards, it can be really, really difficult if if people are out of step with each other. And so I would say that's another really important piece that Kelly and I and our teams do, is we are in constant communication with clients to make sure that we don't fall out of step, because that team doesn't just include the employees and the contractors that are focused on that product. That includes the, attorneys, it includes bankers, your insurance consultants, it's everyone. And the people that are really good at this, from what we've seen, is they're in constant communication. They find their trusted advisors, and they're in constant communication with us. And they share information. They listen to our counsel as it relates to risk and their employees and what they're facing. And we tell them, hey, here's what's around the corner. You've kind of reached this point in the company. Here are some of the things that you're going to face right around the corner. And so we share that with them. We show them what's happening with our other clients. Obviously anonymized and generalized, But the point is that to the degree that they're willing to engage with not only their internal team and deal with issues that come up, but also to adopt and trust in an extended team. And that's where we really excel. And we love that. Anything to add, Kelly?
Yep. Yeah. You talked about the other day about pulling a team, pulling a team together. Communication is very much the key, right? I mean, constant communication. You can't just throw a bunch of people in that you think fit and expect them just to sort things out by themselves. It's great when that happens. I saw a video just yesterday on Steve Jobs, and he was talking about how he attracts. He says, I just selfishly look for the A players. Now, you define what that A player is. And there's not people that are better than others, smarter than others, right? It's the ones that fit your team, right? And he said, once you get those A players together, however long it takes, slowly grow, whatever, if that's what it takes, because once you get them together, you almost don't have to manage them anymore. They start to really like each other. They communicate well. That's the key. Communicate with each other, and they just gel. It makes your job easier.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, definitely. Just to add to that, as Michael mentioned, you have to really invest in those relationships outside your company as well. And you guys talked about how you might have your financial advisor in place, your CPA in place, your lawyer in place. But when you think about it, it's kind of odd that we spend most of our time trying to grow our wealth as entrepreneurs, but we don't spend too much time trying to really protect it. Like when we're in that high growth mode, when we're those cheetahs trying to just get to the next step, oftentimes we're not really thinking about how to protect it. And so it's kind of critical that you have a relationship with those extended team members, also internally, but the extended team members are huge. And so that's where we come in as just kind of insurance advisors. And so your insurance advisor should be someone that, can walk you through the exposures that are unique to you. And most importantly, you talk about communication. It's someone that will answer the phone. You need to be somebody that's reliable, that'll answer the phone, especially in your greatest time of need, which might be when you're potentially having a claim.
Yeah, or some crisis, right?
Yeah.
I mean, deep down, Mike, you talked about this the other day. Kelly, you're a problem solver. And I approach my clients the same way, where I'm like, listen, you might have a problem in corporate law, which, I know very little about. I don't have to be dangerous, right? Or litigation, or even insurance, right? And they'll come to me, and I might just turn them into people. But what's really important is that you see so much. You have so experience. You spot these issues. You're really a problem solver. Because when people think about advisors, they think about people like a teacher or something, maybe nagging them, right? But when you talk about, you put it in the frame of you're a problem solver, that's really what you're talking about. You try to anticipate problems, but when they're in the soup and they got a real problem, you want to be the first one to call.
Yeah.
Right? How do you project that onto your customers, your partners?
Yeah, and I think the way that we end up in that role, really, Dave, is what you've already mentioned, which is communicating. And the way that we often communicate is through questions about, what about this? What about that? And so we call it sort of exploration or discovery. And what we're trying to do is we're trying to suggest with these questions, as well as really uncover where are the risks and also point to them. And I can give you one example in the realm that our teams work, which is the realm of, and you mentioned this before, Dave, which is that, especially those that are younger and have tons of energy, but a little less experience, right? So they never think of the terminology of disability as applying to them.
No kidding.
It's one example where they say, as soon as they hear the word disability, they say this about, it's kind of, I don't know what happens, but it becomes this switch where they're like, well, I'm not disabled and I don't plan to be, so I don't know how this is. And they're invincible. They're so young and vibrant, and they feel great.
And all their friends are in the same place. They're like, I don't know anybody sick. That happens to other people.
And look, we've all been, 25, 20, 27, 30. where we're like, I haven't been to the doctor in 2 or 3 years. Like, I feel great. Like, it's not that big a deal, right? And it's like, and that for a lot of people that are really healthy and people are super into working out and eating right. And the truth is, they probably haven't been to the doctor in 2 or 3 years. But, it's like, is it worth, a 45-minute visit once a year in case something has cropped up that you don't know about? I can tell you right now, the answer is yes. Go get your preventive checkup every year, because if they catch something, it could save your life. Yep. Is it worth 45 minutes every year to go get a prevent? Yeah, it is. But let me go back to the point about disability, right? So that coverage is essentially, if we called it instead paycheck protection, where you said like, well, what if you were disabled and you couldn't do what you're doing for the rest of your life? How much are you going to earn from now to the rest of your life? Like, to Kelly's point, don't you want to protect that income stream? Because for a lot of these people, that's what they're relying on. They don't have a huge amount of assets that, they're not at the end of their career. They're at the start of the career. And right. So that's just one example. And we've seen claims in that realm. And there are people that are our clients that, they come back to us and they're like, hey, thank you. We have some security now. We would have had to move. We would have had to, there would have been all these disruptions to our life, except that we have this coverage. So, wow, I didn't think it was really important, and I barely listened when you were talking about it. But man, is that important, because we don't see that as a risk, because it seems like a really, really low probability. But that's why it becomes cost effective. It's because it's a low probability, you can afford to get that coverage. And if it does happen, you're like, oh my goodness, thank goodness. There's something there to protect that. So I don't know if that makes sense. I just feel like that's a great example of like early.
I will tell you, given my, I'm a little accident prone, and I will tell you, every nickel I've spent on insurance, I've gotten back $1. I mean, maybe I'm just lucky and unlucky in that regard, right? But yeah, and you don't realize this until later in life when it really matters and it hits home. When you have family, you have kids. Don't tell a young entrepreneur that. They're like, okay, dad, right? But they don't realize, this could happen anytime. And also this stuff is a lot less expensive when you start young, life insurance, right?
Yeah, those kinds of things are. And, they're uncomfortable topics is the truth. That it's an uncomfortable thing to talk about. But I tell people, it's like, put it in a compartment, have the conversation, make the decision, and then put it away. And then you could sleep a little better knowing that you've taken care of the loved ones that may be depending on that income stream, right? So that would be one example.
And then Kelly, I'm sure when you're talking to people younger and older, right, you're also probably finding yourself uncovering problems that they had never even thought of, right? I think down the hall is the guy that does wills and estates. And I'll never forget when my wife and I went in there, she was pregnant. We didn't have our first kid yet. And there's an uncomfortable situation. Let me tell you, you start talking about your estate. Okay, let's assume both of you died like now, and you've got a kid out there, right? You're like, but when you're done with the process, like, oh my gosh, I'm so glad I have that in place. And I can think of dozens of insurance products where that would be exactly the same thing.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. Michael talked about asking questions to just kind of figure out what are the hot buttons, what makes you not able to sleep at night. And we were actually joking earlier, for a sports analogy, I know you guys are baseball guys, but this is a football one, but we kind of act as the quarterback of kind of the insurance risk profile and just setting strategy. And it's like, okay, what are you concerned about? And we can kind of guide them through that. We insure a lot of venture capital and private equity firms that invest in tech companies and consumer packaged goods companies. And so, for example, with a VC or PE firm that have a board seat on a portfolio company, we set an overall strategy with, hey, what do you want your portfolio companies or those companies that you're investing in to look like? What do you want their risk profile to look like? Because ultimately, it'll affect them too. And so we, for example, have set a strategy around D&O, directors and officers in firms.
Yep.
And we'll say, hey, all the portcos should probably carry a $3 million, $5 million D&O limit, because that really acts as the private equity firm's retention before their policy kicks in.
Sure. Sure, sure. And I'm also hearing that, so, when a person goes, think of a big company and they go to HR and they fill out their insurance forms, hand them in, it's the last time they see, right? I mean, you guys advise the CEOs for their plans. This is what's best for their employees. But what I'm hearing is that each employee really needs to engage with you or your colleagues, because my story is different than this other person and this other person, right?
Yeah, and I think that actually brings us, Dave, to one of the things I wish I could do, which is what you said, which is engage with every one of them. But unfortunately, for our clients, we have larger clients, and
Yep.
we engage with the leadership, especially the HR and finance leadership of those firms. Yep. And what we try to do are set up programs and enable them to help their employees to make great decisions about their financial welfare, their health, their families, because those programs that we put in place for them, that gives them the options to put these protections in place. I wish our team was capable of taking all of those calls. We have partners that we work with that help the companies that we serve that, deal with the individuals themselves. But one of the things that drives all of the work that our teams do is this belief that we can change the trajectory of people's lives by moving the needle upstream for them. And so it's really helping them make better decisions about their health and their financial welfare so that they can live long, fulfilling lives. And companies want that too. As an employer, you're in a unique position to educate employees about their health, about their medical benefits, their dental benefits, the implications of things like their annual checkup, right? These little things. And so as an employer, we believe that education is critically important. And back to communications, we spend a ton of energy and time making sure that the communications are concise, they're relevant. We're competing with a lot of messaging, right? There's a lot.
No kidding.
Employees are so busy, they're so distracted. They have their team, their boss, their initiatives, their career, their families. They have all these things. And they're like, what do you want? You want to talk about my medical deductible? I don't even know what a deductible is. They just, and I get it, especially if they don't have a desire to talk about that until they have a need. Unfortunately, the reality is if they have a little bit of education up front about what kind of coverages they have in place and how their decision-making, whether it be at open enrollment or when they join a new company or where they're considering taking on COBRA or signing up for a certain benefit, whatever it is, if they have a little bit of education, they can establish themselves as, they can put themselves in a very good position, both health-wise and financially, to be able to work really, really hard and do great things in their life. But again, it goes back to, it's our dream to be able to, and it's our vision to be able to just move every person a little bit further down the line of being able to make that great decision, because one decision early on in your life, it can make a difference.
No kidding. And I guess, so one message to come out of this discussion is from the employees, get yourself educated. If they're not doing it for you, drive into HR and say, hey, remember that thing I signed? I got some questions. I heard Michael and Kelly's talk, and I've got some questions. I feel really uninformed. I think most people do, right?
Yeah.
And for employers,
I would say for employers, it's really, we work with the employers, and the goal is, the hope is that the employees, when we get their attention, that, to your point, they take in the content, they take a few minutes to ask questions, they get to a deep understanding of it. And then once they get to a place where they feel comfortable with their options and what they've chosen for themselves and their family, maybe, then they can move on and focus on their jobs. We're not asking for like, hey, you should think about this every day. No, don't do that, right? But when it's time, do the education. But even upstream from that, really what we hope to put in place and what we hope to do with employers and the people who are bringing in these great resources is help them attract and retain the very best people for the team. And once they've done that, make sure they're not distracted by the belief that they've somehow got some inferior program compared to other companies. And so the goal is, let's make sure that we have a competitive program that includes some combination of cash, equity, and benefits that is fair and is appropriate to the HR strategy for that company. And every company is different in that regard.
Yeah, and often in big companies, I hear people talk. I mean, they're almost like the natural enemies, because HR is. You think of them always trying to keep a lid on everything, on the salaries and the hiring and all this kind of thing. Their role is totally different than that. I mean, that might be one of their big motivations with budgets, but that shouldn't affect employees. Employees have needs.
If employees had, I mean, sometimes it's just a matter of like them getting a deeper understanding of how much the company is paying for them to have the benefits that are being offered. And sometimes people don't realize it's on the order. It can be on the order of 10 to 20 to, we've had clients that have decided that their number is $24,000 to $25,000 a year per employee, right? So it depends on their strategy. To Kelly's point, what is your strategy for this? It could be a product strategy. It could be, your employee, how are you going to engage with candidates in the market? How are you going to attract and retain? And then you look at it on a multi-year basis. We want to get to here. Here's what we see as maturity. Here's what other companies do when they get to 400 employees. We're at 200 right now, and we want to be here. And so we help them develop that strategy, and then we execute it with them, right? Like as a coach.
I think also what I've seen is employees don't really, like, I think it's to your point, is that they don't understand the value of this thing that they're getting. And it's not just the amount that they're selling, because they get discounted anyway. It's cheaper for a big company to get a policy than a smaller company, or certainly an individual. Mm-hmm. But you're really it's like you're giving them a gift that they don't understand, right? So if you give them that gift, which I mean is part of their compensation, they have these great policies and these different things, helping them understand what they can get from that. Otherwise, it just sits on the shelf.
That's right. That's right. And we do focus on what we call utilization, which is the statistic that we look at in terms of do our employees, first, are they enrolled in the benefit? Did they decide to accept the offer that you made? And then once they're enrolled, to what degree are they utilizing this benefit? And we get statistics. We share that with employers. And then we survey employees to understand what they want, what they understand about the program, how the education was. So that it's just trying to stay close to the population, understanding the demographic of that company, what are their interests, what are their likely needs given their tenure, and where they operate, and what it looks like from how their family members. What are they likely to need or want?
It's a system for the informed. Correct. It really is a system for the informed. And if you're not informed...
And there's huge inefficiencies associated with being uninformed. And so
there was a company that was nearby here not long ago, and they had a bunch of... all their employees were on visas from Israel. And there were 39 of them, and they had families, and they had insurance, and all these things, right? Lots of money, well-funded startup. And then the company went out of business, like overnight. They said, we're closing the doors. And the worst thing they did is they cut off their insurance a week later. Now, there's no COBRA because the company went under. Uh-oh. So I had a seminar in my office. I got folding chairs, right? I had them all come in and learn what the follow-on insurance is, right? Tying policies and things, tail policies, right? That is I witnessed a very frightening thing. Pregnant wives, children, right? And here they were left out in the dark, right? And if they would have known this, they could have, they often end up just completely empty-handed and no resources. Why? No communication.
Yeah,
no communication.
There are tough situations like that, and it's our hope and our approach, which is to work with the executives of the company and have enough education available through either synchronous, we'll do webinars, just like video calls all the time,
sure,
to benefit the employees, or we put together content. We have mobile distribution of content. People are used to consuming information on their phone, right? They're used to, And so we can chunk it out and make it bite-sized and send it out and compete for their attention the same way that social media companies are competing for their attention. So there's lots of ways that we can use technology to reach employees and educate them. And if they're uninterested in a certain topic, it takes them less than a second to look at it and be like, I don't need that. I'm not enrolled in the FSA, so I don't need that. But if I am, be interested to understand how am I going to use those funds, because those are pre-tax funds. That's another big component of what we do on the on the benefit side is focusing on helping people optimize their financial welfare, not just from retirement readiness perspective, but also from the perspective of utilizing the most tax efficient approach to paying for the things that they need to pay for. And there's all kinds of ways and considerations. All comes down to education.
Sure does. It sure does. And also, we talk about risk management. You leave your employees high and dry in the street when you lay them off or fire them, right? I mean, you want them to be taken care of, not just because you have exposure, they could sue you or something like that, but you don't want the world to see you as this oppressor who leaves people high and dry, even though you supposedly gave them all the proper benefits, right?
Yeah, that's right. And then the other piece is, there's the business entity itself faces risks, and Kelly and our team that looks at the operations of the business and what the risks are as they do that. For example, Kelly works with CPG companies. She works with tech companies in all kinds of realms, and there's product liability, right? There's liability related to management decisions. I think we've already talked a little bit about that. But Kelly, anything to add on the business, on the risks facing the business, not just the employees?
Yeah, please, Kelly, talk about that. Product liability, whether it's a consumer packaged good, software, right? I mean, what should people be thinking about when they're launching their products?
Yeah, definitely. I think it's really important when you're setting the strategy to be working with a specialist in a certain area. There's a lot of people that are generalists, but if you have a specialist, they can kind of build off of all the other clients in their Rolodex, right? And just kind of hone in on the biggest exposures. So I could talk all day about all the exposures of a company, but tech, for example, a lot of the conversation is around technology E&O or professional liability, because it contemplates—
Explain what that is for the people listening here, the E&O insurance.
Yeah, so that is a policy that contemplates a mistake that the company is held liable for in their professional capacity. So, for example, the technology product didn't perform as intended, and we handle a lot of software companies, so we see these types of claims all the time. That's a big piece for tech firms, and arguably one of their biggest exposures. Along with that comes cyber. You've probably been hearing about cyber a ton in the news. They've started putting it in the movies now, which we love to see. Just bringing awareness, because it's become one of the most frequent claims, and it can really take down a business if you're not properly insured.
Oh, can it cripple a company technically? I mean, they can just go out of business, right?
Yeah.
Ransomware.
Yeah, ransomware. Ransomware is one of the top 2 claims in cyber right now. Ransomware. I had a client that came into work one day, and all the computer screens had skull and crossbones across the screen. No one was suing them technically, but they couldn't work because the hacker had their systems fully locked up. That led to a business interruption and a loss of revenue. And sometimes these hackers request ransom as well. Believe it or not, some of these policies will pay the ransom, depending on the situation. So
a policy will pay a ransom.
Yep. Yeah, it will. So there's a ton of stuff that goes into these cyber policies. Another huge claim, probably the most frequent claim right now, I like to call it WTF, wire transfer fraud. Wire transfer fraud is, a phishing event, somebody tricking you into wiring money to the wrong person. And I've had that happen to so many clients where they say, hey, no, it's okay. We have 2-factor authentication. We have a multi-step verification process where we pick up the phone and we check the email, things like that. But these hackers are so sophisticated and they somehow get around it. And we've had clients wire one tranche of money, two tranches of money, and then by the third one realize, oh no, maybe this isn't my CFO requesting this money. Maybe it's somebody else. And
terrifying.
Yeah, definitely terrifying.
Right. And there's so much bias in that system. You're dealing with banks now, right? And they don't want to be liable, right?
Yeah.
I had a friend who, this is actually a terrible story. His daughter in her 20s hacked into his retirement account. He was 62 years old. So was his wife. Both had 401ks, hacked in and took every single dime, gambled it online, poof, gone. Several $1 million, they have zero, right? Of course, they panic. They run to the bank and they go to, and these were big 401k providers. They're not small banks. And not only that, but she was able to open up new credit cards, take a second mortgage on their house, and their house was paid for. They were ready to retire, right?
Oh.
They go back and fight this. No insurance coverage. And what little insurance that their banks had, they didn't cover if it was a family member, which is ridiculous, right? And the litigation costs, long story short, he's not getting his money back. He's not getting a dime back. And she even went in a second time and took his paycheck away months later after it was even discovered. But the banks will fight you because they don't want to pay that bill. They don't want to write a check for a couple $1 million. Oh, we're sorry you lost your money, right?
Mm-hmm.
So talk about risk mitigation. If you're left on your own without any resources or policies, you can lose every bit of it and there's no recourse.
Yeah. What's cool is if you do have a triggered cyber claim, a lot of the policies will include forensics coverage. And so a forensic analyst can go in and actually look into the system and figure out, okay, hey, where did this hacker get into the system? What exactly did they take out? Things like that. Was third-party data involved? Things like that. And so that's really helpful when you're just trying to, the loss has already happened and now you're just trying to mitigate it and figure out what to do next.
Yeah, even if you don't get the money back, you can trace it and find a different cause. Maybe someone else who's liable who has policy, right? I mean, it really is. Yeah, again, it's a system for the informed. It's extremely sophisticated and hackers can get anywhere against anybody.
Yeah, once a tech firm comes up with some sort of software to block the hackers, they'll just find 10 ways around that to go.
It's an arms race. It's an arms race, isn't it? It isn't. Yeah. So you can't count on this thing, the walls being high enough to keep the warriors out. You need to have policies that mitigate your risk. We're back to risk.
Yeah.
Back to mitigating risk. Young or old, you're mitigating risk. What if you lost all your money?
Exactly.
It's real.
No kidding.
Yeah. Michael, you also asked me about consumer packaged goods.
Consumer packaging, please. Yes. Mm-hmm.
Yeah. So Michael and I insure together a lot of consumer packaged goods companies. That's a company like maybe an energy bar, chocolate bar, any sort of packaged snack. And Dave, you asked about product liability. That's huge for CPG companies because it protects the business if someone is hurt or injured while consuming the product. Mm-hmm. So I've had clients where consumers have actually ended up in the hospital and had to have medical procedures done due to a specific ingredient in the product. And that can lead to financial ruin. It also leads to kind of loss of reputation.
No kidding.
And it hurts your brand a little bit. So product liability policies are very helpful when this type of situation happens. A lot of times it can be like multiple people being affected by it too. Mm-hmm. It's not just one person that gets sick. It could be maybe a class action. So these things can get pretty big.
Say class action, it makes my blood boil. We know where that goes, right? Yeah, big liability. Let's use a case example, right? There's a company I'm working with now, a company I founded that does a pet, say a nutraceutical, right? It's just eggs and milk. The dog consumes it. It makes his tummy feel better, right? So What type of risk are we mitigating there?
In terms of the dog getting sick?
Well, yeah, this is a product that we're selling that's meant for dogs, right? It's nutritional, right? And what kind of insurance, what kind of liability should we be thinking about putting this product on the shelf or online for sale online?
Yeah. Well, I mean, any product on the shelf or online has a product recall component to it, a product recall exposure to it. And that can also be a dramatically large loss because it covers costs associated with pulling that product off the shelves due to bodily injury. So I don't have an example about maybe a dog situation, but I do have an example about I had a manufacturing facility that was creating a food product. A piece of someone's eyeglasses, their eyewear, I think it was like a safety glasses in the manufacturing facility, fell into the mixing machine of the product. And it wasn't discovered until all the product was taken out and it was, onto the next steps of production and all the way out to shipping. They look in the bottom of the mixing machine and there's a little piece of safety glasses. Wow. And so the rest of it had been chopped up and put in the product, right? And so they had 3 trucks of product out on their way to a huge, massive grocery store. I can't name the grocery store, but it's one of the biggest. They were able to save 2 trucks from getting there, but one had already made its way there, and the product was already on the shelf. So they had to pull everything off. Obviously, you have a loss of income. You have product replacement costs because you spent all that time and money creating, those 3 trucks of shipments that you can't use. And then again, you have brand rehabilitation again.
No kidding. And I'm learning too, it's funny, I was talking to an FDA expert the other day, is that now the animal regulations in the FDA are soon going to rise up, and they probably almost are, at the human level. And that's true with everything you're talking about. And the example they gave me is that there's this weird thing now where some animal owners want to eat with their dog. I eat with my dog too, but I mean, you actually eat their food because you want to be close to them, right? So now the consumables, it's no longer just your dog, right? You get a human that eats this thing, even though it says not for human consumption, right? They end up in the hospital. There they are, right? And you've got nothing but an excuse. We wrote it on the package, right? So,
yeah, definitely. I mean,
product liability.
Yeah, exactly. And I've talked about CPG firms and tech firms, and I touched just a little bit on BC&P earlier, but there's obviously tons of other exposures to these companies. I just wanted to highlight a few, especially the ones where we're seeing, the big claims. But I guess my overall point is it's different for each company. So you have to have that expert in your Rolodex as your extended team member. And really what Michael and I call each other is your outsourced risk manager. A lot of times these entrepreneurs don't have the funds allocated to an internal risk manager. And so we like to be that outsourced resource just to guide you through it so you can have, peace of mind that nothing's slipping through the cracks.
Yeah, and most companies,
really valuable advice.
Yeah, and most companies, I mean, you think about sort of the stage in which someone brings in, a formal risk management role that's a full-time role at a company. I mean, we're talking, the company has, millions maybe in revenue and thousands of employees maybe before they have a full-time risk management role within the company. So the role
that's not a minimum wage job.
No,
right? No, not at all.
And there's usually a department, right? So these are like Fortune 500 companies and some of them that have risk managers, they still need to know what's going on with everyone. And so they still need to work with a company like ours or with a team like ours because they want the nuances. They want the data and the analytics and the claims information that we have across. Our company's huge. We have 1 million plus clients, right? So we have huge transparency into what's happening globally from a claims perspective and which carriers are doing the right things for their clients And so we get to sit in the middle and tell our clients, here, even though you've got this risk management team, you don't have the perspective that we have, right? And so whatever stage you're at, we play a role, whether you're a nascent company and you've just kind of raised money and you're about to go to market and you're wondering what should I even be concerned about from a risk perspective. We can help with that. But our focus of late, our teams have been focused on helping the growth process. So what am I concerned about now? We're about to, bring in, a new round of capital. We're about to acquire another business. Transactions are hugely risky. We can help with M&A, right? There's M&A coverages that you can put in place. You may not know something about the company you're about to acquire or the company that's about to acquire you. So that transaction has risk on it. So there's things that we can put in place to help protect and ensure that transaction goes through. Does that make sense?
Something I never heard of such a thing.
Absolutely. Yeah. We could put in place protections for the acquiring company or for the company that's going to be acquired, right? So there's all kinds of things that are worth talking to us about to say, hey, I don't know if we can get over this thing. Like, there may be a way over it if we could manage that one risk that you're concerned about.
It's interesting. A lot of the companies I work with, it seems the only visibility they have as far as risk is concerned, or even outcomes, is as long as their money runs out. I mean, where's your runway? Because they know what they have to deliver, right? And they might just be taxing down the runway, and then they got to do another raise of money. But that's where their knowledge ends. Talking to a person like you know how you can get them all the way to their destination, takeoff, landing, destination, but they don't see that. Like, look, my mind is around, I got a taxi down the runway and I'll talk to you later.
Yeah. And I would say, Dave, one of the other things, they work with investors. They have a board, they have attorneys, they have people outside the company. And some of the risks that they're going to face, for example, the risk that 10 competitors enter the market, that's not something that you can insure against, right? There are some risks, right, that are just the risk of doing business, right? And there's upside and there's downside. And our focus is on those that you can manage the risk of. But a lot of people don't realize that there are some areas where it's like, I didn't even realize I could protect against that downside. And that's where it's helpful to have the dialogue. We'll decide that, well, we can't protect you from pricing risk. Like what happens if all of a sudden everyone else, is now getting this from a place where it's a lot cheaper? Well, that's pricing, right? That's a market, that's kind of a business risk. And some of the things we hear, and Kelly and I both, we hear from founders and leaders of companies, and sometimes they say, most of the things I worry about, some of the risks that you're talking about don't make it into the top 10. I'm like, well, that's because you haven't had a claim.
Yeah.
Right. That's because you haven't faced that yet. And even if it doesn't make it in the top 10, wouldn't you like to know that it is no longer a factor?
It'll never be in the top 10.
Right.
Yeah. Right.
And we get it. Sometimes they're like you said, the risk of we might run out of money before we can hire this person to come up with a great marketing strategy. It's like, yeah, that's true. There might be the risk that the product that we designed, there's a supplier risk. There's all kinds of risks that we cannot help them with, but at least the ones that they can manage by having a risk consultant involved. Be great if they knew that they could reach out to us and we can help.
Sure.
Does that make sense?
And Kelly, to one of your earlier points, it sounds to me like people think about what things that are in their control, and they'll dwell on things that are out of their control sometimes and lament over them, but they feel like they have no control over them. But what you were saying earlier is that, these examples you were giving, these things are not in their control, but you can mitigate the risks in case this thing that is not in your control happens. Obviously the health issues, right? Some of that's in your control, but not entirely, right?
Yeah.
The things that are out of your control are the things you're really helping them with. Not just the things you can't see. Okay, now you see them. The things you can't control, you still can't control them, but there you are. You can help them mitigate that risk.
Definitely. Like if we go back to the example of the ingredient in one of my clients, CPG product. I can't say the name of the product. If we go back to the ingredient, sometimes people think, hey, well, my food product is manufactured by a third party, so really it's not my risk. It's their risk, and it shouldn't really affect me. Well, your name is on that product, right? So it's always going to come back to you. And so there is risk in that. And so those are the types of conversations we're having as well.
Right. And back to the nutraceutical company, the company owns none of the processes, right? Mm-hmm. There's a farmer that raises the eggs. There's a university that powder turns it to powder. There's a packager that mixes it and puts it into a package, and then it goes on the shelf. No touchy, but it doesn't mean no liability, right?
Right. Yeah.
This stuff my product is in someone else's hands.
Yeah. And to your point, you might not know exactly what's going on with any of those third parties. I mean, you have an idea of it, and you should have a pretty strong idea of it, but maybe that one ingredient gets in there that you just weren't aware of, and then you're down the road of a class action claim.
No kidding. We know lawyers, they go after the source. Where's the big money, right? And they're, well, what's easy? Because it's my problem, isn't it? Mm-hmm. It's my product. My name's on there. I'm not going to hide behind, it happens somewhere else. I don't know where, right? That's not how the system works, is it?
Definitely not.
No, not at all. Well, guys, this has been really, really informative. I'd like to hear from both of you. I think most of our viewership is really a lot of entrepreneurs, but I like to think that they're in all different classes, startups, big companies. What's the biggest takeaway you would say? Kelly, you first.
The takeaway from the podcast?
This talk, yeah. Uh-huh.
I think the biggest takeaway is honestly just bring us in from the start. Let's have those conversations. Let's figure out, okay, what's making it so you can't sleep at night? What are the questions you have? Do you know what risks might be applicable to your type of business? And then let's talk through it. You don't have to buy every single line of insurance right away. That's what Michael and I are here for, is just to kind of guide you through, hey, this might be an exposure now, this might be an exposure later. And we're just kind of working together as a part of your team. We want to be there for you as a part of your team, ready to answer the phone whenever, and just help you along the way so that you can sleep at night.
That's a great opening question. Tell me what's keeping you up at night. And when they answer you, you say, well, that's great. I can solve those problems. Here's what's going to keep you awake a year from now. And here's how we're going to solve that problem. Suddenly you're waking them up. That's really great approach, Kelly. Michael, you get the last word.
Yeah, I think Kelly nailed it. I think, I like to look at this from the perspective of, focus on what you're good at and use your coaches, use your team, and let us be good at this component. But in order to be good at it, we need to engage, right? So it's just being in constant communication. We talked about communication, and bring us in, and then help us to help you. And in the particular realms, there's a couple of realms, right? So one is business decision making, and one is attracting and retaining a great team. And that's an area where our team really excels, is how do we help you attract, retain, educate a great team. And that's everything from compensation to their health and welfare, to their financial welfare, to what are they concerned about, where do they live, what are the compliance regulations. I mean, I think when we try to share with people sometimes, even with our existing clients, like, oh, I hear this all the time. I didn't know you did that. It's like, okay, well, we need to talk about that, right? Because compliance in the realm of your benefits in this state is different than compliance in this state. And like, I didn't think I needed to tell you when we hired somebody in that state. It was like, okay, well, there are rules and regulations associated with having employees in this state that are different from where you started your company. Oh my gosh, right? And so that's a particular example of high communication and we're generally in touch with clients as often as our largest clients a couple times a week, right? We're constantly in touch with them, and so what I would say is, no matter what stage you're at, find your experts and trust them. Figure out what you need to do to find them. Trust them to take care of this one area and follow their guidance, right? That's kind of what we ask, is just engage and let's focus, and we'll help. And so we've seen great results when people engage. We've seen great results when people say, they raise their hand and they say, I've got a question about this. And it's like, generally speaking, we've seen that before because we have so many clients.
Of course. So you take their worries away, you fill their emotional bucket, send them back to home plate, and they can swing for the fences, right?
There's the baseball analogy.
Sorry, Michael and I can't help it. I can't help it.
Yeah, it's all about the team. All about the team, right? And stay positive.
Stay positive, always. Kelly, Michael, thank you so much. And thanks for being on Innovator Cafe.
You bet.
Thanks so much, Dave.
You've been tuning into Innovator Cafe, the entrepreneur go-to, with your host, attorney Dave Stevens. You can find more episodes on all the major platforms, including YouTube, LinkedIn, Facebook, Apple Podcasts, Spotify, and the website, StevensLawGroup.com. Thank you for your positive reviews, comments, questions, and for sharing this show with others.